any minutes received yet, so we'll have to take item 2 up next month and hopefully do a couple meetings worth of minutes and get those done. So let's go ahead and jump into item 3, the climate action update, and I guess we're going to start with you, Donnie. Is that?
Yeah, I can introduce him a little bit, just to give you guys, give Donnie a little introduction. He is the lead for the Climate Action Plan. VHB is the firm that's leading it, and there's 2 sub-consultants, Resilience Planning and Design, and the Rockingham Planning Commission. I'm sure Donnie will talk about that, but we had a kickoff meeting yesterday or day before, and looks like they're on track to do some really good work for us. So I'll turn it over to you, Donnie.
Okay, great. Thanks, Peter. Are you able to give me screen share capabilities?
Sure. Yep. I just got to make you a co-host. Let's do that.
Okay.
Where's that button? Oh, it's over there. It's not over there. There you go.
Okay. Looks like we're good to go. Okay, so I prepared a short presentation. As Peter mentioned, we had a nice kickoff yesterday with Kate and Sarah from the library as well. And I wanted to review some of those outcomes today. But in terms of the overall agenda, I just wanted you to get acquainted with the team. I know I'm the one here tonight just representing the entire team, but there is a larger group of individuals that are tapped to work on this, including 2 sub-consultants that you may be aware of. Number 2, just going over the project definition and some conditions of satisfaction, things that we've already identified with Peter and Kate and Sarah as things that we want to make sure that we're keeping our eye on and making sure that we're delivering at the end of the day in terms of the project and making sure it's successful. Very quickly reviewing the scope of work, I believe you've all seen the RFP, RFQ, but we didn't change too much from that and deviate too much from that bid document. But I do want to remind folks of what we're doing, and we're doing that in phases. And then just reviewing the schedule, and then just a quick discussion and Q&A. So again, Donnie Gorskolb here with VHB. My deputy project manager is going to be Garrison Beck. I wanted to put everybody's photos up here just so you're familiar with them, because we may be reaching out to you. We may be having regular interactions with you on this committee and other committees within the city. I'm joined by Steve Whitman from Resilience Planning and Design. Him and his team are going to be responsible for the phase 1, for the most part, community engagement, and we'll be supporting. Tim Roach from the RPC, Rockingham Planning Commission, is also on the team. He's going to be supporting from a data analysis standpoint and providing and working on crosswalk analysis with his team's understanding of the regional plans and actions, and we want to make sure that we're consistent with those and not reinventing the wheel where that doesn't need to take place. And as I mentioned, there's a larger team. These folks will be touching the project where it's reasonable and appropriate, but a large group of talented individuals across VHB, and then also RPD and RPC. So what's the project definition? So as you know, we're working on a climate action plan, and we're doing so to enable the city to address, mitigate, and adapt to climate change impacts. As I mentioned, we're doing it in 2 phases. So 1 is community engagement and outreach, and 2 is the municipal community goals for tackling climate change and through mitigation and adaptation. As I mentioned, we did have some condition of satisfaction exercises, or a exercise yesterday, where we asked, what would project success depend on? And Peter and Sarah and Kate again participated in this during the kickoff meeting yesterday. 1, the community is aware of the project, and I think there's already been some effort to advertise the fact that the city is doing that, but making it that awareness broad, but also making sure that the community is on board with the project, so that anything that as the project moves forward, they feel like they've been a part of it. And the engaged community represents the city's diversity, so not just from a racial or ethnic standpoint, or a low-income standpoint, or addressing some of the underserved populations, but making sure that we're also reaching out to folks, regardless of those demographic factors, who typically don't engage in municipal planning activities. Planning for reduction in community-based GHG emissions. So this one came from Kate, just recognizing, having her work on the GHG emissions inventory for the community, that most of the impacts are emanating from community-based activities. So we want to see a clear path to reducing those emissions. Not over prioritizing the municipal emissions or the emissions that are owned by the municipality, but really focusing on where there's a lot of leverage and a lot of need for the reduction. Actions that are achievable at various scales. And what I mean by that is, and as an example, community members can do this in their own households. They can take it up and they can implement it. That the CAP is a go-to document for city staff, boards, and commissions. So similar to how a master plan or a strategic plan is picked up within the various or by various city employees, that the CAP is also looked at as one of those decision-making tools in terms of the decisions that the city makes in terms of procurement or its policies, et cetera. And that the targets are socialized, explained, and achievable. So I'll get into it in just a second how we're going to be developing those targets, but that is one condition of satisfaction, that we do have targets in the first place, that people are aware of them and are engaged in the process of developing them, that they are adequately explained, what it means to reach this target, not just we're going to do this target or aim for this target, but also making sure that the city can reasonably, and the larger community can reasonably achieve them within a specified period of time. So in the scope of work, I don't want to bore you too much with the details, so I tried to make this a little bit more succinct than what we presented to the kickoff group yesterday. But task one in phase one is community organizing and CAP engagement, as I mentioned. We'll be developing an outreach plan, and RPD has already presented a draft and template of that document to me yesterday, Peter, so I have to review that and give that back to you guys. But that we see as a dynamic effort, that we have all of these different opportunities to engage the public. We have a limited budget, but we want to do it in a way that is going to be successful. So we can identify some activities and some outreach opportunities, but if we see that one activity or opportunity is working more so than the other, then we can be a little bit more flexible in terms of how we're doing that outreach. That outreach plan will also include activities that this consultant team is not going to be responsible for, but that can be picked up by groups like this, like you, or the city staff, and say, okay, well, we're going to be meeting with these folks. Why don't we have the materials that we're presenting at some of the other public touch points and share those materials with this group or that group, and then just making sure that we have a way to bring that information back to the consultant team so we can incorporate it into the plan as those building blocks. I mentioned the public workshops. We have 3 of them. One is a kickoff with the public, another is data gathering effort, and another one is broader public presentation to talk about the targets and the strategies and things of that nature. We anticipate that these workshops are going to be accompanied by materials that again can be shared with you folks to take on the streets, to take to community contacts and points of contact. Baseline condition summary is also included in this task. We're not responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Those are being done by a third party, but we'll be taking those and providing a synopsis of the results and the methodology that went into it. And then also as part of that, highlighting the purpose of the project and the importance, building awareness, again, that the margin for success overall when we're talking about climate change more broadly is definitely narrowing. And there's a criticality here. And we want to marry that to some of the climate impacts that you may be facing or have already been discussing as part of your group and as part of the regional and statewide plans. And as I mentioned, RPC, Planning Commission, is going to be doing a crosswalk analysis. So existing plans and projects we want to document, whether they're from city-based or they're based in a larger region. We again just want to make sure that we're covering and making sure that we're aware of things that are going on that we can capitalize on for opportunities or efficiencies. Things that we want to be aware of that are happening, so that we don't do things in a different way that might debilitate or otherwise, make more difficult an action to be, implemented either by the city or by other entities. And I mentioned here on the slide key partners. Obviously, you're listed here as the first bullet, but we also have Enforcement Climate Action, the Formula A Solutions, and the Seacoast Students for Sustainability. We're developing a larger map of key partners as part of this project, and we're going to be trying to tap into and identifying how to tap into those key partners along the way. Task 2 is the development of strategies for the emission reduction goals. So an inventory of climate mitigation strategies and preliminary screening. What we're going to do is take all of the ideas that we've gotten from the public engagement effort through phase 1, through the crosswalk analysis that RPC is going to be doing, plus what we bring to the table as consultants and saying, okay, well, here's our inventory of all the reduction strategies addressing the various sectors that are covered by the greenhouse gas emissions inventories. What's applicable? What's feasible? There may be things that we identify that aren't, necessarily appropriate for the city. Maybe it's an issue of scale. Maybe it's an issue of, this particular sector isn't really impactful or generating that many emissions. Whatever the case may be, we're going to have to do that preliminary evaluation or screening. And then what we're going to be doing or drafting some reduction targets for community input as well. So what I mean by that is we're going to be taking all of the list of strategies that we identify, as part of task 2, but also as part of task 3 when we start to prioritize them, determining what's reasonable and feasible, but also taking a look at what others in the region are doing. So there's other communities around you that are developing or have developed climate action plans. What are their target? Do we want to match those? Do we want to go beyond that? If we go beyond that, is it reasonable? Is it feasible? Given what we've identified as strategies, do we want to even go further and say that, and with the community's blessing, that, you want to go net zero, which some communities but mostly at the organization level are doing, and commitments that they're making. As I alluded to, task 3 is the prioritization analysis. So we take all of the strategies that are applicable and feasible, we apply a scoring framework and screen it against certain evaluation criteria, which may be implementation, ease of implementation, or cost, or GHG reduction potential, or co-benefits, or climate justice considerations as well. We'll be going in front of the city and saying these are some draft criteria. This is a proposed scoring framework, and we'll go back and forth and see which set really makes the most sense, and then go through the evaluation process. And the end of that evaluation process is going to be a score where that will allow us to start prioritizing certain strategies over others. And I have this graph to the right-hand side that does just that, or it illustrates it at least. We have the cost on the y-axis and the ease of implementation on the x-axis. And we have the individual bubbles are strategies, and the size of the bubble relates to the size of their GHG reduction potential. So you start to see that those in the lower left-hand quadrant cost less and are easier to implement. And those that are higher, have bigger or larger bubbles, such as 15 or 18, maybe some of those high impact, low cost, low effort initiatives that you might want to put into the short term, funding plan, for example. Task 4 is incorporating renewable energy into city requirements. So there aren't a lot of green building or renewable energy references in the city's ordinances. We're going to go through and identify some opportunities for amendments or any incentive programs that could be baked in there. As part of this, we're also looking at some preliminary locations, rudimentary analysis of locations for renewable energy installations, like the high school. Task 5 is updating the emissions forecast. So we'll take what was done as part of the 2021 updates for the local government and the community-based emissions inventory, and just apply some growth factors and make some assumptions about efficiencies and things of that nature to come up with a forecast, future-looking forecast. And we'll be providing the city with that tool that we end up utilizing, along with the list of assumptions. Task 6, short and long-term funding plans, first 5 years, low cost, less complex. and then everything else coming with a set of funding sources, grants, incentives. That's task 6. Task 7 is tools for monitoring and communicating the CAP progress post-plan. So a big component of this is really setting you guys up for success. And part of that is tracking and monitoring. And we're going to be developing a dashboard that will eventually, I believe, be situated on the city's website, although there was some talk of some other application, Peter, and I think we need to maybe revisit that one. After my presentation is over, Peter, is this the group that, my apologies for my lack of memory, that initiated the program?
Yeah,
dashboard?
that's right. They can probably speak to that. Is that
Okay,
maybe?
awesome.
Yeah.
Great. So either we'll be developing a dashboard, a simple dashboard to put on the city's website, or we'll be utilizing that platform that you guys have been evaluating and maybe kind of investigating. And then lastly, task 8 is the climate action plan and post-plan engagement. So this task just includes pulling everything together in draft format, putting it in front of the city council and the public, getting adoption hopefully by the end of this calendar year, and finalizing it. But then also having a capstone public presentation led by Resilience Planning and Design and Steve Whitman, really to, one, celebrate the plan, and then two, really clearly lay out the responsibility of the community in helping achieve the intended outcomes of the plan itself. So making them aware that they're a key partner in this process and giving them tools necessary to participate. And again, that's sort of baked throughout, right? We have the different various workshops. We're going to be reiterating that theme, but we're also thinking about strategies and ways that we can, scale this plan down to the household level. So the project schedule, this may need a little adjustment. We're going to try to truncate it by a month or two, really to meet the goal of getting everything done by the end of the calendar year. But right now we're going to be entering into phase 1. And like we talked about, we just hit the kickoff with Peter and Kate and Sarah yesterday. So we're going to be hitting the ground running next week and the week following to get the outreach plan, started, to start planning out the crosswalk analysis and other engagement touch points, following up on the 2021 updates for the emissions inventories. So really we're going to be concentrating on the phase 1 for the next few weeks, if not month. But as part of that, again, although the task name is community organizing and CAP engagement, we're going to be working behind the scenes on the baseline analysis as well. And I think that's my last slide.
Thanks a lot, Donnie. Thanks for, and I didn't tell everybody here how short a notice you got to do this presentation. He really was, I asked him to come at our meeting yesterday, so really good of you to come. And I think you have a little bit of time for questions, is that right?
Yep, a little bit.
So,
Questions, anyone?
Hand from Josh.
And from Josh. Go ahead, Josh.
Hey, thank you, Donnie, for that presentation. I just wanted to make myself available to you if you had any questions on the 2017/18 net zero energy policy that the City Council adopted. I had chaired the Renewable Energy Committee at the time, and likewise, I wrote it's like a 40-page document on a framework to achieve it. It's a little dated, but if you do have any questions on that, feel free to anyone on your team reach out and go from there.
Okay, great. Peter, I don't know if we received that. It's not ringing a bell.
if you haven't, then I'll get it to you. I'll check, but it would have been in the list, I would think, but maybe not. I'll check.
All right. Thank you, and thank you, Josh.
Yep.
Bert?
Donnie, I really like what I saw and the criteria, and because I'm looking at the big picture globally, and I do some of that, what I'm wondering is, because you've had a big perspective, and because our time frame is so short from what the basic data is out there, we got to make a change to
Yeah.
keep it in a short period of time. And in your criteria, as you're stacking them up, how, from your perspective, we might have two projects. One might be easy and cost-effective, but actually, it's going to take us out the time frame of when we really need to get it under control. So in your criteria, how are you looking at, and what's your experience with helping a city, one, look at what the possibilities are on all the criteria you said, but then also evaluating in terms of a roadmap, these things need to be done in the next 10 years, these in the next 20 and so forth. I'm kind of using the drawdown roadmap to say, they're looking at this, and I was wondering, how does that stack up with what you're doing?
Yeah, so the evaluation criteria and that evaluation process is going to give us some prioritized goals based on the scores each strategy or action receives. But there's going to have to be some play with that. I mean, that's just going to tell us, okay, well, this is meeting these criteria, because it's advantageous. But we're going to have to do some gut checking this, because there's going to be some capacity concerns with who's going to be implementing them. There's going to be some funding concerns where, certain funding mechanisms aren't going to be available for such X number of years or are not currently available. There's going to be some this planning that go along with some of these strategies. So you can't do it on day one. You have to do it in 1, 2, 3, 4 years based on what other factors are coming into play for. But so there's a little bit of gut checking there. But as part of that one task on short and long-term funding plans, the task is funding plans, but really what we're doing is doing an implementation, and phasing of everything that we've pulled together. So the prioritization comes into play. Also, again, the capacity, the funding, the lead time to getting it actually implemented. But we'll be working with the city and the larger community really to figure out where everything falls into place. And I think one of the questions you had was, okay, well, if it scores really high, but it cost X amount of money, but that money is going to be taken away from something that could be done and could have bigger impact. We just have to maybe do it a little bit longer in the time frame. But if we do this particular action, is that going to be pushed out even further? That's the balance that we're going to have to play when we're developing that phasing plan. Did that answer your question?
Partially, let me,
Maybe not so much.
well, no, I'm harming you. It's a big question. Like,
Yeah.
what I'm understanding, if we can get a handle on methane, for example, that would be a really good thing to do now, because that would buy us time to get to zero in other energy things. So that might be a high priority. It's something that would give us more time. I'm looking for things that are going to give us more time to implement. Because if we don't get it done in the next certain period, it doesn't make any difference what the long-term plans are, in a way. Is that clear?
Yep. I'll make sure that I write that down.
I've got more of a comment than a question. Donnie, thanks for the presentation. I'm Effie, and I've worked a lot with this committee and the Portsmouth Climate Action Group. And really, my question is somewhat general, but what's the best way to communicate with your group? Because we have a lot going on, and I want to make sure you know about the work that Bill Lyons has done with his team on transportation, the work that Tori's doing on green buildings, the work Jess is doing putting together Earth Day events, and the contract we've entered into with Bright Action for a community platform for people to choose actions related to climate action. So that's all going on. So what's the best way to communicate with you?
I think it's going to be through Peter and through Kate. Is that correct, Peter?
Yeah, that's the easiest way, and then we can keep track of it and make sure they get everything, and we're not
Yeah.
calling them up.
One of the data needs, I think, that we identified yesterday is just gathering all of the information that you guys have developed and all of the activities that you're doing. So, communicating that with Peter and Kate, if, I think they were aware of most of it. But just getting some sort of documentation or reference doc that I can, and my team can look at, and see the progress that you've made, where you've been focusing your priorities and your efforts, would be most helpful. We have we're going to have a document share. So anything that you share with Peter or Kate, they can easily just upload to our, it's not our server, we'll just call it the cloud. And then we'll have access to it.
Great, and I hope April 21st and 22nd, some of the team might be available for Earth Day kickoff and Earth Day Day of Action.
Yeah, I could check with Steve. He's more of the boots on the ground.
Good.
He'll have more boots on the ground throughout the project.
Great.
But I could definitely check with Steve about Earth Day activities. We've already started to talk to Kate about what activities and events are happening throughout, the planning project schedule. And, the 400-year celebration is one of them, and everything that's happening around that. But certainly Earth Day and around that time frame is another opportunity as well. So we're just starting to develop the list of event dates or important dates that we can tag along and build awareness of the project.
Great, thank you.
And one of the things we talked about on the Earth Day in particular was, I think Resilience Planning and Design is going to prepare some kind of table materials or approach that we can get in touch with people about the climate action plan, get information back, that kind of thing. So it's already on the list, but I think we probably should talk more about what's going on in detail so we can make sure they get it all.
Great.
And Donnie, the general stuff that Effie was talking about there, that's all, if I'm understanding right, that's all part of your crosswalk analysis? Is that what
It should be.
that's part of?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Lorelei, did you have a question?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say the crosswalk is more an assessment of existing resources in comparison to the broader inventory, but that's slicing pears or whatever the phrase is.
Thank you.
First off, Donnie, I just wanted to thank you so much for being here. It's so cool to see how far the Climate Action Plan has progressed over the past year. I wanted to introduce myself first off. I'm Loralee Godfrey, 18, from Portsmouth. I'm also the Policy Director for Seacoast Students for Sustainability. So my question for you has to do with just a general sense of the next few weeks or so. So I have a basic understanding of what your next task is in terms of community organizing. But what does that mean on a day-to-day basis for you? Are you writing up a to-do list, email these community stakeholders by this time frame? Are you connecting with the library? What does your day-to-day look like implementing this first task?
Yeah, so the next couple of weeks, we're going to be developing that outreach plan. So that outreach plan will include all of the events that we think that we're going to be participating in. It's going to include points of contact. Really, the next couple of weeks is going to be building all of that out and trying to ascertain when the consultant team is going to be reaching out to those groups and participating in those events. What events are opportunistic for the city to participate in and grab presentations and grab flyers and go to these events and share it with their points of contact. The next couple of weeks is just going to be building that outreach plan for the most part. The next couple of months is going to be starting to finalize that outreach plan, but then also continuing to beginning to engage groups like you and like others. So we do have that outreach plan does include some tracking processes as well. So like you were mentioning, reach out to so-and-so on this person, I'm sorry, on this date. But it's not going to be as detailed as that. It's going to be more broadly like, here's our milestones, let's make sure everybody's aware of it. And building out that milestone schedule along the way.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Kate?
Thank you, Aubrey. I'm Kate Cook. I'm the other Kate. on the committee, city councilor. As a city councilor, of course, my question is around implementation and community tolerance for cost. So I'm wondering how much assessment there's going to be done on what the community is willing to spend, basically, on implementation of a plan like this, in tax dollars numbers. I'm willing to let my taxes go up by $2, per thousand. I think that's a big question.
Yeah, well, we'll be doing as part of that short and long-term funding plan, and part of the evaluation process as well. Those criteria that we mentioned is going to be cost. So we're going to be placing order of magnitude cost on each of the individual actions, and then trying to figure out, okay, where does the bucket of money come from, and what are the plans for funding? Is there IRA money available, Build grant available, BRIC grant available? Is it applicable to these certain grants, and trying to lay that all out. As part of our scope, we're not going to be converting that into tax dollars or the addition of X number of dollars for property, but we'll definitely be putting order of magnitude cost and trying to marry that as much as possible to currently available or expected grant opportunities.
Thank you.
Wasn't your question, though, more about
Tolerance.
community reaction to
Yeah,
it?
it's more like how much tolerance are our residents willing, is that part of the survey process? Is how much tolerance, like for cost, are you going to measure that in part of the surveying process?
Well, yeah, that'll be part of the engagement process, but as you saw in that graphic that I put up on the screen, we're trying to be very clear about how it all plays together. So it's cost, but it's going to be emissions potential, right? So it's like bang for your buck, and illustrating that and making it very clear, and then taking that to the community and saying, okay, well, how do you feel about it? You're going to be spending this much money, but you're going to be getting this much impact. So it's like $1 per ton of CO2e removed, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Bill is up, by the way.
Okay.
I have a
Sorry.
question that piggybacks off that, so let me just go.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, and then we'll get to you next, Bill.
Along those same lines, is there any sort of ROI analysis for the impact as well? So you were converting that to like greenhouse gas, but is there like, in 5 years, you'll be, this will be paid for and then it'll be cheaper in the long term? Is that part of the calculus?
Well, no, we're not scoped to do a return on investment calculation, but one thing that we've been incorporating into our plans is for folks that are thinking about carbon neutrality or have a limit to their at some point they're going to be required, well, not required, but they're going to be strongly encouraged to purchase renewable energy credits or offsets for whatever remains outside of their existing target. We try to marry, give you a cost of cost of carbon. We incorporate a cost of carbon into the analysis to say, if you're not going to be doing this, you're going to be paying this, but in lieu of actually reducing the emissions, you're going to be paying X amount of money to purchase those carbon offsets. So it's not exactly what you're asking for. We're not going to be doing return on investment analysis, but we will be incorporating sort of other economic factors into the decision-making process, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
Bill, go ahead.
So, hey, thank you, Donnie. Thank you very much for the solid presentation. I'm involved with Portsmouth climate action activities that Effie described, particularly those related to the transportation sector and early ideas for the CAP. Had a question on the approach to the crosswalk analysis, and I think that makes a lot of sense, whether you're looking at goals or activities or plans or engaged organizations. But I would encourage you to start with the static approach to make sure you're not duplicating or confusing things, but also maybe end up with a more dynamic approach. I think particularly thinking on the transportation side that RPC produces a federally required 20-year long-range transportation plan, and it may be that the Portsmouth Climate Action Plan can provide new ideas for that are either not in there or could be stronger in that, and that the crosswalk could end up being a dynamic one, because obviously if all the good ideas were in the existing plans, then we wouldn't need a cap. The cap is really the chance for new ideas.
Yeah.
So that bigger question, and the second one is just your thoughts on the time horizon for the cap.
So the first one, I'll give an example. So for the city of South Burlington, Vermont, we're currently working on the implementation section of their transportation sector component of their climate action plan. And we've done a crosswalk analysis, but to your point, we don't stop there. We take a look at everything, we see what's missing. We see, certain things are going to be outdated as part of that crosswalk analysis. Does it need to be updated? Is it still applicable? Does it need to be updated from a technology standpoint? So we don't stop with just like, the basic of looking at all the plans and just documenting them and seeing how we can aggregate them into a climate action plan. We definitely make sure that we're looking at them critically and making sure that we're supplementing as necessary. And then the second point, in terms of the time horizon, that we typically look at a 10-year horizon for implementation, 10 to 15 year. Really, that's as far as municipalities tend to think. I'm thinking about typical master plan efforts as well. Things change. Climate science changes quite often, as you probably are aware of. Targets that we set today may be not as ambitious as they should be tomorrow. New technologies might arise, new priorities might arise. Embodied carbon wasn't really talked about. Five, certainly 10 years ago. Now it's, the term or phrase. We just did a webinar on decarbonization, and we talked today, and I moderated that, and a big theme was embodied carbon. How to address it and how important of a role it's going to be moving forward. And, things change from a perception standpoint as well. Decarbonization was really equivalent to renewable energy. And now the thinking is changing a little bit, focusing a little bit more on that optimizing and reducing. So the time frame shouldn't be too long. In fact, 15 years is probably too long. So probably a 10-year time horizon. But the targets that we set are going to be a little bit longer, because you can't achieve substantial savings, and you can't set a 2030 goal with it being 2023, and you have to be realistic in target setting and in the implementation phase.
I think on that first point, yeah, thanks for that. First point, I think having RPC as a partner, I think, is really great, because particularly on the transportation side, there are things that Portsmouth can do within the city limits, but since most trips either originate within the city and go out, or vice versa, looking beyond the city limits is key in aligning the plans and the projects with the neighboring towns and with the region. I think is going to be key to implementation.
Right. Yeah, you think about electric vehicles, and that's a big component of a lot of climate action plans, but a lot of the need for electric vehicle charging, since you have, it's the 95 that goes right through, right? There's going to be a lot of transient traffic and trips that are going to be requiring, a spot to charge, and level 3 charging that, for example, is qualified under the NEVI program is something that you might want to take a look at, talk with the state DOT on. And that's more of a regional thing. Transportation generally is more of a regional concern, but.
Thank you.
Quick question. Donnie, this is Herb Lloyd. Quick question on the municipalities that you folks have developed caps for. You know, once your contract is over, the cap is delivered, it's adopted by the municipality, and you folks walk away. What's been your experience with those municipalities then maintaining that cap? Because it's great that it's done, but I would think, and I'm not familiar with this, that's why I'm asking, that maybe on an annual basis, the cap is reviewed to determine if changes need to be made. The climate is changing probably faster than we're able to update the cap. And so that's the reason I ask, is I think that's probably important.
Yeah, so a big part of the scope of work, and there is an optional task that we could talk about once the project is over about post-plan engagement. But part of the scope, as laid out in that RFQ, is really about maintaining momentum after the project or after the cap has been adopted. And that's the point of that capstone presentation to the community, is to really engage them and motivate them to be a participant in this process. So moving forward, trying just maintaining that motivation and engagement, continuous engagement. I think Effie, you mentioned the platform for soliciting ideas or identifying or commenting on ideas or actions. Part of our deliverable is also delivering that evaluation tool that we'll be developing in Excel, and we're going to be handing that off to Kate and Peter. And their role is going to be, as I described it yesterday to them, is it's going to be a dynamic process. As part of the ongoing engagement, you'll get new ideas, some idea that you'll want to enter into the platform and see, how it scores. Does it rise, or should it be, incorporated into the implementation phasing earlier than others that were identified in the cap? Are these new ideas something that you want to go after because there's new funding available? I mean, there's new funding available coming out every other week on these for these different types of projects that enables new types of projects that you didn't think that you were going to be going after. I mentioned the NEVI one. That's discretionary funding for that program is going to be coming out soon, and that's going to be accessible by communities. And you're not going to have to go through the state DOT. So those types of things have to be continually investigated. Ideas from the community continuously collected. Those ideas evaluated to determine whether or not they get into the implementation plan. And moving forward, accountability is going to be key to this too. So reporting back to the larger community on progress, having that dashboard, and showing progress over time. If you don't move that needle in terms of your overall production toward a production goal, and it remains stagnant, and you're advertising that's part of that accountability process and transparency on delivering the goals of the plan.
So, yeah, and just a follow-up, thank you for that, and a follow-up would be, so South Burlington, for example, as their cap is implemented, what are you seeing? Would they look to update that cap every 12 months or 24, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
Well, it's more of a dynamic process, an ongoing process, but yeah, regular reviews to just make sure that things are still on track is recommended. Just to clarify, we're still working with South Burlington, so they haven't finished their cap. They finished their primary cap right now. So they've adopted that. They've moved on to the implementation plans. So they're dedicating a little bit more time to, fleshing out implementation steps and implementation partners and considerations. But just to clarify that point, that we're still working on that plan.
All right, thank you, Donnie.
Thanks, Herb. I was going to ask a very similar question, so.
Sorry.
Anybody else? I had one last question then, and this is probably minor, but I saw on your schedule of implementation one thing I didn't see mentioned otherwise, which is volunteer training. Can you talk about that a little bit more? What's the role for volunteers and what is that training?
Yeah, we still have to define that, so I'm not ready to, describe that in perfect detail just yet, but the idea is really to, expand the network or the opportunity to, the network of folks that are communicating with the community. Certainly things have to be established in terms of the logistics and the rules of engagement and the information that's shared and how we're gonna get that information back. But the team, and particularly RPD, has had success with a volunteer network. So we're going to work with them and build that into the outreach plan that we develop. Certainly we want the community to be part of the engagement process, and volunteers or climate action leaders or liaisons or ambassadors are going to be a likely avenue that we pursue as part of our overall outreach plan.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Last chance? Well, thank you very much, Donnie. This has been a great presentation. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Donnie. I know it's a little longer than you expected, but we really appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Bye.
Take
Bye.
care.
Excellent. All right, our next item, you can't see behind the screen, is City Council Head Start. Steve, is this you?
Yeah, this was something I wanted to just talk on for a minute or two. I mostly have a question, but just give me a few minutes to sort of get to my question, so bear with me as I sort of fumble through this. So I was thinking about CAPS and some of the climate action plans that we had seen, and I was poking around on the internet, and I came across an article from the National League of Cities. They looked at climate action plans across the country. They identified common themes that occur in climate action plans. Top 5 themes, or top 5 areas, are energy efficient buildings, electric vehicles, optimizing waste operations, access to public transportation, investing in renewable energy. So some of the things they're seeing under here now, I'm gonna run through it real quick. Energy efficient buildings appear in 83% of the CAPs they looked at, and they see things like policies and standards for new construction, programs that encourage retrofits, deep retrofits, PACE financing, I have down here as a note. Electric vehicles appears in 81% of the CAPs. Invest in charging infrastructure, electrify municipal fleets, incentive programs for residents to switch to EVs. Optimizing waste operations appear in 81%. They see decreased waste generation, increased recycling, obvious. Access to public transportation appears in 79%. They see expanding hours, transit frequency, subsidized costs for individuals, building new transit routes. And last but not least, investing in renewable energy. They point out this ties into like a lot of the other themes, and that it's critical to decrease reliance on fossil fuels. So I mention all this to bring up the obvious point that the things that we're going to see in this climate action plan, a lot of them are not unknowns. They're out there. We know what has to get done in a lot of cases. Now, they're bringing the expertise that are going to fill in a lot of the gray areas and the details. But so I started thinking about, like Bert likes to mention, points of leverage in systems thinking. And I started thinking about this committee. And so we're a blue ribbon committee at the request of the mayor to help advise the mayor and the council. And typically we have 2 council members, planning director, sometimes deputy DPW director sitting in on the council meetings. Those are leverage points that I think maybe we're not utilizing fully. Maybe we could utilize, we have these leverage points sitting right here. So I guess my question is this: knowing a lot of these things that need to be done already to help not sit on our hands and wait for the climate action plan to be presented to us at the end of the year, what can we do to help the council start taking action on some of the stuff that we know needs to get done. And just for an example, I'll always go to like solar, because solar is a fairly simple thing. Like, we know we need more solar, wind, whatever, carbon, zero carbon sort of energy. I'll say zero carbon. I'm not talking about embodied carbon or anything like that. Let's just bear with me. But okay, so should we be putting more solar on municipal buildings around the city and identifying places? Like, that seems like a no-brainer kind of. So does the council need to ask us to help them with that, or do we need to say to the council, go do this? I just don't know how it's supposed to work, but I think this is where we should start leveraging our power as a committee to give the council the head start, so when this climate action plan is done, and so the consultants don't have to necessarily spend as much energy saying things like, you need to put more solar up, because we know that, and we're already doing that. So I guess that's the question. How can we make that happen?
Right, and that ties in with, like, a topic Herb's brought up a couple times
Solar.
about solar at the high
Parking
school.
canopies.
And parking canopies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the
And,
TCAG stuff is like, they've got
And
great work, and I don't know how much of that is being implemented or being looked at, or, but there's a lot of work being done,
right.
so how can
And
we?
Tori, for example, has been doing a lot of work leading our subcommittee to try to put in municipal guidelines for municipal buildings as a starting point, and that's going to happen, much sooner than the cap will. But I agree, makes a lot of sense.
I've been trying to find spaces where we could do something without seeking funding. And one of those areas was green buildings and what Tori's working on right now and that team's working on. But where can we have an impact? Can this committee have an immediate impact without it impacting directly the budget? And the reason that I'm saying this is that the challenge around the budget is always prioritization, right, for the council. And the CIP budget doesn't start with the council, it starts with the planning board. So all those things with budgetary implications, like a new solar array or more solar on buildings, has to first go through kind of this huge capital planning process. And then when it gets to the council is weighing what the priorities are or not. And those priorities are coming to us somewhat staff-led, because the staff presents initial priorities to the planning board, but then also there are changes made at the planning board. And then it comes to the council, and the council's trying to weigh all these different things and what is really, truly urgent and has to be done now, and what can be put off for a while. But we don't have a lot of climate action items sitting in the capital improvement plan at the moment. And I think that in some ways, the city is kind of waiting for the climate action plan to drive that funding toward these projects, because it will say to us, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and therefore we need to make sure we have a capital budget that addresses these things, because they're this urgent. But without that study that says how urgent these items are, we are relying on the department heads and planning, who's already done all the vetting, to tell us this is what we have to do right now. So if it's not sitting there, it's not getting funded. And that's a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge for us. It'd be great to find all the little things that we can do that can be addressed outside of the capital budget in the short term, so that we can get the bigger things in the capital budget. And Peter's driving that part, I think.
Effie?
Maybe Peter should talk first, but I was going to say about the capital budget, this came up last year from the Portsmouth Climate Action Group. We just looked at the template that's used to drive the capital budget process and the criteria, and they're not about climate change, slowing down climate change, saving energy. There's one of them mentioned kind of as indirectly. So when I looked at that and wanted to redo the process, it was too late in the capital budget process. And what we heard was we should wait for the climate action plan consultants to come in. Yet I didn't see on their list like a broad policy review that might include the capital budget. Maybe I missed it, but I was looking for it and I didn't see it. So that's something
Well,
I'd like to follow up on.
Can I go? So that, I think there is more detail in there about updating ordinances and updating the city. I guess, to get at the bigger question of what should we be doing, I guess we're still talking about what the city should be doing here. And the city could be net zero, and we're 2% of the problem in the community. So the work that Effie and Jess are doing, getting community engagement, doing these Earth Day events are what really needs to be focused on. How do we get the community on board to do things? And yes, the city needs to be the leader, and yes, the city needs to incorporate climate solutions in their CIP process, and I think that will come, and I think the CAP's really going to support that. I think there's changes happening much faster than it had in the past. But if we're just going to talk about what the city's going to do with solar panels on city buildings and electric school buses, then we're still only tackling a small part of that problem. How do we, things like the energy aggregation plan are something the city sort of started, but that's a community effort. So things like that are going to have a broader reach, are what we want to be thinking about and try to address, so we can go beyond just, making the small changes.
Sorry, you
Go
go.
ahead. No, I was going to say that it kind of, the question though, what can you get the city council to do? I was going to raise this under other business, but it's a question that's come up in my other committee, in governance. What committee sits and, in the long run, monitors progress on the climate action plan? And it's likely this committee, right? The sustainability committee. So maybe it's time to be thinking about a different role for this committee instead of having a blue ribbon committee. It's been a blue ribbon committee for a very, very long time. And what we've been trying to do in governance is take the committees that are standing committees, make sure we have standing ordinance for standing committees. And so maybe this group, and I want your reflections on it because you're the one sitting on the Sustainability Committee, needs to think about, do you think that there's a more permanent role for this committee in the long run? And if so, what exactly is that role for this committee, so that we can draft the right ordinance, so this committee stays around to, if it's monitoring implementation, or if it is community outreach, or if it's, all these different functions could be defined easily, and then you'd have a permanent ordinance, and you'd have people who are appointed not for necessarily 2 years. You could set, what is the appropriate term. And, that would be a much more permanent status for this committee. But that's really for this committee to decide. We try not to make those decisions for other groups, so.
I have a question. I know that we talked about this a few months ago, but would establishing those rules and guidelines slow us down right now when we're trying to implement or Earth Day activities or work with the Climate Action Plan? Is that going to hinder us more than it will help us for at least the next few months?
You can, well, it depends on how you want to establish it. It shouldn't have any impact. I mean, it depends on how you set it up. But you can also set up ordinance that takes effect on a certain date too.
Gotcha.
So you could assume that, say you wanted to stay a blue ribbon committee until the climate action plan is adopted. And you can put that language in an ordinance upon council adoption of that this goes into effect upon council adoption of the climate action plan.
And I have a follow-up question, if that's okay. Is there a benefit we would gain from becoming a standing committee? Would it be more legitimacy, or would it be to just ensure that this committee lasts longer than the members who serve on it?
The second item, definitely, because the challenge around blue ribbon committees, and this one has never been impacted by this, so that's why this is a real question for you, is that they serve at the willingness of the mayor to reappoint them. So at any time, you could have a mayor that says, I don't need that committee, and then you just wouldn't have the committee. And everyone on the committee is supposed to be reappointed by the new mayor. So you could also have a mayor that just doesn't reappoint any of the people who are sitting here on the committee, that chooses a whole different group of people. So that's the challenge around blue ribbon committees, is they're just really amorphous. We don't have good rules for them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bert?
Thank you, Kate. I've not been in favor of being a standing committee. And what you just said has hit me in a spot where it relates to what you said at first. you were saying, what can we do without a budget? And I'm always, or I think frequently, what we do in the way of process is probably one of the most effective things we're doing. And without any money, if we shifted, and I'm just playing this in my mind because you struck a real powerful note, I'm thinking we have, and I didn't articulate it, but we have a short period of time to do a lot. And this committee has been more casual. And I've been saying a lot lately, over and over again, reality dictates the nature of the response. And the reality of where we're at now, as a city, as a world population, it seems to me if our committee was spelled out to be what you just said, you just articulated, that made sense to me. Then we have a role, and Peter, you've been always saying that, and you know, when we come up with the slide, that it's the community. Well, if our role is to monitor the CAP, which is public engagement, and I'm asking them, how do we prioritize? So anyway, I'm really thinking that that might be a leverage point. I'm opening it up for discussion because we've been a very casual committee when, and now it can't be business as usual. And I'm thinking if business as usual would make this committee maybe be, well, I'll just wind up. I am doing more now than I've ever done. And I don't want to be doing as much because I want to do less. But I'm also saying that if we have an opportunity to do something, that's what I think we should do. And I would just ask, what would it take now mechanically to become a committee, a standing committee? And I throw that out to you, Kate, or anybody.
Josh is wanting to weigh in, so he might have a thought on that.
So, two thoughts. I'll start where Bert left off. For a long time now, and I've been on this committee, I think, 5 of the last 7 years or 7 of the last 9 years. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I always did think having a standing committee would be far more effective than a blue ribbon committee. Now, the makeup of that committee, it would be different. It'd be a set number of people on the committee. We might have a requirement of the planning directors on the committee, so on and so forth. But I do think that would be the right direction to follow with this committee to have the largest impact, especially if we're going to be the ones overseeing the implementation of the Climate Action Plan. So that's my first thought. But going back to what Councilor Cook had said regarding what could be done outside of, what could be done by the City Council prior to the Climate Action Plan being adopted. It's for reasons that she hit upon. It does make sense not to do anything big to get too far ahead of it in case it comes up with great ideas which are less expensive. But the city is doing a lot of small things which will likely be factored into the Climate Action Plan. Peter alluded to the community power, the aggregation, which the City Council voted on this past Tuesday night to pursue. In the capital improvement plan itself, there's currently $150,000 per year starting this year for the next 6 years for EV charging stations. So there's stuff like that where we can make a difference. We're getting ready to act on the CIP, but once the CAP comes out, it'll be able to influence the following year's CIP, and that's where a lot of our money, or at least a lot of where our planning on how to spend the money goes. That's two long-winded responses, which I apologize for, but just to summarize, I do think it's almost past time for this committee to be considered to become a standing committee, and the City Council will continue to pursue things, but would make sense from a capital improvement plan standpoint to wait for the climate action plan to actually be completed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks. I'll answer on process, because I've done this before, because this is what kind of governance does. We basically go to the legal department and ask them to help us draft language to establish another committee. And in this case, you'd want the committee to set up what the parameters are of the committee. Like, you'd want really clear feedback. This is what the committee's purpose is, and this is what the committee will be considering. You know, now those can be really, really long-term concerns. You know, looking at education in the community around sustainability measures, looking at community, providing communication to the community around the climate action plan, monitoring implementation of the climate action plan. You know, they can be kind of big goals because you want them to be. The committee's going to be around for a while. And then you can also define who is on the committee and how many members should be on the committee. And one of the ways that that you allow for membership, for example, like our student membership, is you say you have X number of student representatives appointed at the high school, right? So that is the way that you allow for members that aren't necessarily being appointed by the mayor. And then you can also define if certain groups should be represented, or have a representative to the committee. You can also define what staff, or usually the way that we do that is we say the city manager will appoint a staff member, because we try not to usurp the power of the city manager. It's the city manager's role to appoint somebody to serve. But that's basically what you would need to do as a committee. Define who, define what your goals are, and then we just start drafting language with the legal department, bring the language back, have everyone look at it, see if it meets everyone's needs. Then that language I'm happy to take to the governance committee to review and make sure it meets, you know, all those requirements, and then either you can have governance committee or you can have this committee submit the request to the council. Yeah.
And on that process, if that, say in 5 years, the committee realized that their scope was altered in some way, it would just be an amendment to that process to change the scope of the committee?
Yes, it's 3 readings at the council. So you request a ordinance change, and it goes to city council for 3 readings. It takes 3 readings to make an ordinance change. So we've done this several times already this year, or this year and last as a council, so.
Okay.
This would not be huge. The cable, I can't even say the name now, the Cable Broadband and Communications Committee now, I think they were the cable television. They came to the governance committee and asked for changes, gave us their changes. They'd worked with legal department. We reviewed them. They submitted them to the council. They were approved. Yeah.
Great. Steve?
Can you clarify something for me? If it was a standing committee, would the mayor appoint all the members, like, at once? Or is there a way to maybe prevent that, so you, like, stagger membership to be renewed, so that no mayor is just, like, wiping out a committee clean and just replacing it wholesale, to avoid sort of that sort of thing, and just give some kind of continuity? So that's doable.
That's absolutely doable. That's what we've been working on in governance for the last 6 months, is committees that are off stagger, trying to get them back on stagger. But when you set up the ordinance, you set up a stagger so that you have certain people appointed for their first term of 3 years and next term, and then a term of 2, or, you know, so you set that up.
2 things. Great discussion. Thanks, Kate and Steve. One is that when the mayor talked to this group in January of last year, 2022, he stated his preference was that this become a standing committee, if I remember that correctly. Yeah, other people remember it too.
You do.
Yeah. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But the other thing I don't want to lose track of is Steve's great idea about, I don't know if you use the word kickstart, Steve, was that right?
Head Start.
Head Start, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Head Start, excuse me, not Kickstart the City Council, about the climate action plan. You know, I remember when John Cardy did the presentation to the City Council and how well it was received, but that was a while ago now. I believe it was the summer of 2022. So, you know, now we have the contractors on board, we really are due to show up at City Council again and update them with all the things going on.
Would we want to have them come to one of our meetings again?
I don't know, we usually go to them,
Oh, okay.
but
So, this is an important night. I'm getting a feel, and I want to see what the group thinks. It seems like we're moving towards a feeling that we should become a standing committee. Did everybody make a fist? If you're saying, yes, you want to become a standing committee, thumbs up, don't do it yet. If you're not sure, thumbs out. If you think we should stay as a blue ribbon here. So,
Can I lean one way or another?
and you can, but hey, it's a range. So, all right, so, yes, I'm not sure, no. When I count to 3, so we don't know. 1, 2, Peter, is your fist out there? 1, 2, 3.
I'm gonna stay neutral.
I think looks
All right.
positive.
So now we got 2 people. What are you, give Ben and Peter, what are you thinking?
When I first heard the idea, whenever that was quite a while ago, I thought, oh boy, that sounds, like it might deter if you were to try and explain to somebody who is a freshman or a sophomore in high school, if it's more formal, it might deter new membership, or it might slow us down. The more I hear about it, those concerns to me are sort of dissipating, and I think it doesn't sound like a drastic leap. It sounds like I think the benefits outweigh whatever adjustments or minor inconveniences there may be in that process. So I'm not like 100% like, yes, let's do it today, but I'm leaning positive, and I see the group's like positive feelings about it, and I see what we're doing and what we're working on, and I think I don't think we would regret going further. I think we might regret not going further in hindsight. That's kind of my perspective.
Now, Kate, in drafting that ordinance, like, to date, like Ben, Lorelei, we have a fairly consistent group coming from the high school, but it is somewhat of a rotating cast.
Yep.
Is it possible to make it so there's 2 seats that can be exchanged, or does it have to be specific people appointed for, say, a school year? What kind of flexibility is there in that to make it easier and maybe less daunting for the students to not feel like, oh my God, that I'm committing to this and I have to be there every month?
So I think that the challenge around it is usually there's actually an individual appointed, but I don't think that that's a requirement. You could write the ordinance that says, and 3 high school students, appointed by representing this organization, or, so.
Like if they're members of the Eco Club.
Right, 3 members of the high school Eco Club. So you can write it that way, and they could probably be listed as 3 members of Eco Club rather than listed as individual roles. We have something similar, not quite the same, with council representatives and school board representatives on committees. We're appointed for the term that we're in office, essentially. But we are individually named, but that can be changed. So our school board representative, for example, changed.
Right.
Right. So there's more flexibility, I think, there in those types of roles. But I don't know that we actually have another committee that has a representative that is not named. That doesn't mean that can't be done. So I should know.
I just hearing like that we would have somewhat like that autonomy to influence that process ourselves. If it were something where we had to do it a certain way, or we could only do X, or we could only do Y. The fact that we could sort of play with the language a little bit is helping me get over like the mental hurdle, and it's like, okay, we can kind of be creative with that.
Right,
Yeah.
because I definitely think that the energy, this side of the room is very important to our committee.
Yeah.
Peter, your thumb, if you want to, I'd be interested in just what's going on inside, because you've been around this a long time, and you know the workings of the government,
Well,
what's happening inside.
You've been around it a long time too, and I guess I see both sides of it.
Yeah.
But the reason this committee, you said to me a couple of meetings ago maybe, this is the most energy I've ever seen in the committee, and that's great, and it's really good. But there's been times when there's, 2 or 3 members show up, or there's not a lot of enthusiasm, and I worry a little bit about that ebb and flow, and us setting some parameters based on this group, and then 5 years from now, there's not a lot of membership, or there becomes tensions that we don't anticipate in what we set up here, that makes it a committee that we haven't needed anything different for all this time. So I guess I'm more of the, if it isn't broken, don't fix it kind of
That's
mentality.
kind of how I felt initially.
But at the same time, it does give you more structure. I don't know. I mean, here's the committee right now as it is. It has appointments. It's not probably like all the other boards, but appointment dates. And I guess I'm trying to, if I could see a huge benefit, I guess I would say it. I think that I can't articulate the benefits clearly. So that's why I'm kind of on the fence. I certainly see the benefit of having a structure to it, and then you have membership. But how do we replace members, and how do we get new members? I guess that kind of goes to Laura Lee's point about we're going to be spending a lot of time, and maybe I'm just being defensive of my time because I got a lot of things going on, and setting up a committee and structuring it is going to take some time. And so those are all the downside. The positive side is we'll have maybe a better ear to the city council. Maybe we'll be able to get a budget. I don't know how that works in terms of committees, but that would have to be put into the budget process. There's pros and cons. So I just don't see myself, and as a city staff person, my role isn't to influence policy and government, it's to implement it. I'm here to do what the city ordinances say to do, and that's what our role is as city staff people. So we're not here to create new things, although, we can suggest things and weigh in on things, but I'd rather be neutral on it.
I want to respond to that. What attracted to me what Kate was saying was our committee taking on the role of monitoring or supporting the CAP. That sounds like a huge, important, necessary, and currently vital thing to do. So what I'm thinking about now is whether we become a standing committee or stay a blue ribbon committee. I'm thinking 2 things. One, we might want to spell out some of those things that Kate, in fact, you already have them. And I think, Effie, I just so love when I see your pencil going, I love the way you're mine. So if somehow we got a little paragraph about what we want to do, that would be important. The second thing, as I'm thinking of how many years do I have left, and what would I want to see in the committee? And I don't know if there's any other committee, and you would know this, Kate, that has a rotating chairpersonship, that has a check-in question. And what I'm working on on an international basis, saying the most important thing we can do is form community that trusts each other and gets to know each other and respect each other and care for each other as individuals. So I was thinking, you know, people are talking here, and I don't have all the scientific other stuff, but for me, one of the vitalities of the committee, I love hearing the check-in question. And I love seeing somebody coming up, and I think chairing the meeting who hasn't chaired before. So I would think in the governance, I would want that built in. It took us 7 years till we got here. Now we've had it. Now, just as a question, I'm assuming we could build that into the governance, a rotating chairperson, facilitator. Not, you could have a chairperson, but I'm assuming that can be built in.
Yeah, I think that you could build that in. You're going to have a defined chair for the purpose of contact. Just, I think you already serve in that role.
Yeah.
So, so that wouldn't change. The committee would have a defined chair for contact, but you could build in rotating facilitation.
I guess in a broader sense, how much flexibility is there when, or if or when we're creating our mission and our structure? How much of this sort of modality could we preserve, and how much would we be forced to change?
So each committee is defined differently in the ordinance. Some committees have a little blurb, and that's it. There's nothing else in the ordinance. So a lot of their work is done by just the way the committee decides they're going to do it. Others have long definitions. We don't have consistency in our ordinances around committees and committee structure. We also don't have consistency around blue ribbon committees. And that's something that actually governance is working on right now, is trying to improve that so that everybody understands what the differences are between these committees, because it's very confusing, I think, to the general public. And so I guess there's freedom there to define, is what I would say.
Yes.
There's quite a bit of freedom. And you'd start working on it, and then, you know, legal could say, well, we really can't do that. And that's where that's where you find out where the roadblocks are. I haven't hit a lot of those yet. Usually it's more about protecting staff hours, which is really critical. You wouldn't want to be asking our planning and sustainability director to spend more time than he's already giving you here, because it's a lot of hours, it's a lot of investment. And so, so you wouldn't want to be creating a committee that is going to take up more staff hours. So that's the only thing you have to be careful around. So you wouldn't say, oh, I have to have 2 representatives from city staff. You know, you have 1 representative from city staff, and then the city manager can send whoever else, you know, that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And certain things I would think, like, say the check-in question, there could be like a soft start and a hard start to the meeting time. And
Yeah.
that would be within the soft start, and then, okay, this is the formal time that we're starting the meeting, which is not unlike what we're already doing as far as recording and stuff.
Yeah.
I think I hid, I don't know if Tori still has a question, but her hand is up. I had a chart up in front of it, and I didn't share screen.
Oh, I was going to ask you to
Sorry
put it
about
back
that,
to
yeah,
that. so thank
sorry
you.
about that.
No worries.
Sorry?
So I guess my kind of question is, when we're talking about trying to make, you know, meaningful action before the cap and then once the cap is implemented, and knowing that the scale of that action really needs to come from the community. You know, it sounds like a lot, and to preface this, I was a yes and now I'm a maybe on if we become formalized, because that formalization process is, I guess, more validity for city council, which is, you know, the point is to kind of impact and influence on the city governance level. But if our main focus is community efforts and community action, are we putting effort into something that's not the main goal? You know, and not saying that it couldn't happen, but I guess just if we have a certain amount of energy and we have a certain amount of push, just being aware of what we could do with that, in all avenues, you know, and I think that there is a lot of valid things to be said about being a standing committee and what that might open up in the future as we push some of those objectives, you know. I'm thinking things like more oversight and, you know, possible, kind of like a standing possible fund from some policy, and that kind of stuff would be easier as a standing committee, but we're not there yet per se, and it's not incredibly, in my view, it doesn't feel incredibly time sensitive, because currently, you know, with our current city council and our current mayor, there is a lot of respect for our committee and a lot of, you know, good view on the work we have and the community we've built. So I think it's just something to consider on that extra effort and hours and how we spend them.
I will mention that there's 10 months left to the current city council, so that is a factor as well. Herb?
Yeah, sorry, Jess. So I have a question. I feel as though, as the cap, we've spent a lot of time getting to this point where we're working on the cap now. I feel as though this committee doesn't have formal accountability for the implementation of the cap, the management of the cap, the reporting, monitoring of the cap as we go forward. And as I was listening to what Councilor Cook had to say, I thought this could be an opportunity to write in that the formal committee, not Blue Ribbon, but the formal committee, that committee, that's a formal responsibility, is the implementation, the management, the overseeing, monitoring, reporting, all of those types of things on the cap going forward, which I think this committee, I think that would be really great to have that formally written out and clearly understood. So I don't know, maybe Councilor Cook, you can comment a little bit on that. Is that something that could be written in? Because right now, it just feels though we're Blue Ribbon Committee. Yes, we might not be around a year from now. And, the cap will be, but we may not. The next mayor could say, you guys are gone, we don't need you. And who really, because the city doesn't have the time, the energy, the effort, the resources, I don't feel, to really manage the cap as we go forward as much as it needs to be.
Oh, it's okay for me to speak to that. So here's what I would say. I don't think that the Blue Ribbon Committee is going away. It's been around for a long time, but I was trying to point out that that's always a possibility.
Yeah.
Like you just have a mayor that just says, you know what, we just have too many committees. It's always a possibility. But you could say that this committee is responsible for overseeing the because really it's the staff's responsibility to do the implementation and the reporting, and the staff is going to be doing that. I have no doubt. But there won't be a committee responsible for looking at that I know of in our current structure, besides this one.
Yeah.
And this committee could monitor that and make sure that that the communication channels to the general community around what is happening is that information is shared in the community. I think that that's a really critical aspect of what our committees do, is they do a lot of outreach. If you think about like the new cemetery committee that was just established, not only are they applying for grants and getting funding to do clean up cemeteries, but they're doing a considerable amount of community outreach and education. And then community members are joining them to do cemetery cleanup, which is fantastic. But they've identified a lot of gaps, which the city doesn't necessarily have someone who's sitting and monitoring that every day, right? So there is a role there in monitoring implementation to make sure that it stays on the agenda of the council, reporting to the council as a committee periodically, highlighting. I think the staff will also be doing some of this, but really, usually that happens because the council asks for a report back, and not every council is going to ask for report backs on implementation. So in this way, that this committee could do those reports as well. So I would say that the world is your oyster when it comes to writing ordinance on committees. As far as I can tell, the one thing I need to really be, though, cautious about is that usually in the ordinance, it requires that everyone is a resident of Portsmouth. So that is one limiting factor. But if you're but if you're a student, you're appointed, it's a little different, represented, because you wouldn't be named, like we just discussed. But that is one of the requirements. So if there's anybody that you want to make sure is included who is not a resident of Portsmouth, but you want them included because they're representative of an organization that's really critical, you would need to name the organization representative of X organization to the ordinance. So.
Okay. Did you have something, Jess?
Well, I just, so I'm sort of doing this. I was definitely on board. I think a lot of what Herb just said makes a lot of sense, and that it really defines a role that would be very useful for this committee to have moving forward. The fact that Kate, and I appreciate we've been a long-standing committee and it hasn't been an issue, but the fact that in theory a mayor could just come in and say, nope, we're done with you, that is a little concerning to me, especially at this point where we have so much momentum and we're doing so much work and crazier things have happened in government. So I don't think that it's outside the realm of possibilities. So that all does really make me want to move in that direction. The one thing I will say, and I might not be super clear on how it works in a Blue Ribbon Committee, is communication. And I think that needs to be something that's discussed. I know that's an issue for the Conservation Commission sometimes, because if we try to discuss anything on email and too many of the commissioners get involved at once, then you need a quorum, and then there needs to be a public notice, and then it becomes like this very formal thing. And so you can't have those just casual email conversations anymore when you're a standing committee, because the public needs to be notified that you are having that conversation. So that is, and I don't think that is the case in a Blue Ribbon Committee, so I would say that might just be another piece to, I don't know, Kate can probably speak to that way better.
Okay.
I actually.
I have a quick suggestion, and that's, I'd like you to speak to that if you want to.
Yeah.
But then my thought is that we're, still have some agenda items and we're running out of time. So it'd probably be a good idea to table this maybe till next meeting. We'll all kind of stew on it and readdress it next time.
Agreed.
I have a short comment on Kate.
I just wanted to answer that concern. Everyone here should know that this is a public meeting. It's appointed by the council. It's a committee appointed by the mayor and the council, and therefore beholden to the same rules as every other committee on public notice and public information. If you have a quorum, you have to notice it. It has to be public and accessible. So that committee is already subject to all the rules of every other committee in the city. So, good to know.
I'd like to suggest and actually ask in the minutes that we put this on the agenda next week.
That's great.
And I would just like to see, I'm not committing, but I'm thinking, is there anybody who would spell out, I'm really interested in, what is the mandate? So Herb and Effie and what is it that we want our committee to do? So I would suggest in the discussion next time, anybody who's written out a paragraph or done some pre-thinking, bring that up, and we'll say, here's what we think the current reality is asking of our committee, and then we could say which way we would consider that again.
Josh has a hand.
Josh, please.
Thank you. I think that's a great path forward, which Bert laid out, where we bring our ideas forward. If it seems like something this committee wants to do, I'll gladly volunteer to work with Councilor Cook and the Governance Committee on drafting a potential ordinance before it goes to the City Council. Being both familiar with this committee for the past several decades or so, along with previously tried to bring something forward to the City Council similar to this 6 years back.
Great, great. Thanks, Josh.
Would that mandate be a charter? Is that what you call it with a committee? What do you-
It's just ordinance.
An ordinance.
Yeah, it's just the ordinance, yeah. Can I just also add for the agenda, can we make sure that we also bring back this discussion on Kickstarter subjects, if people think about that for next month on what we can do? Because I'm really intrigued about what else we can do. I'm really excited about what Green Buildings is doing. It's kind of a Kickstarter item, so.
I'll bring a wish list.
Okay, I'm waiting to know.
Just quickly before we move on, because I know we're a little crunched for time, just mine's a little bit related to Bert's question. I've seen this more as like an outreach community forum that then funnels, I guess, ideas and influence to the city government directly. Does being a standing committee then shift our focus to influence? Because I know if we have city employees, we're not supposed to be influencing. Or does our mindset remain the same, if you will? And then I guess my other question is, if, like Jess said, if there is the possibility that some mayor or council wants to get rid of us, if we are a standing committee, that's no longer possible. Am I right? Or would the potential of having funding and having greater influence actually be a double-edged sword? Would it draw more ire in that case? Maybe that's too cynical of a point of view.
No, it just changes the way that happens.
Okay.
So if a mayor wanted to get rid of you now, the mayor would just say, okay, we're done, and that's it. And it doesn't even have to necessarily go before the council. But if you have a standing committee, in order to change the ordinance or eliminate it, it has to go through three readings of the council to eliminate ordinance. We just eliminated several committees that just weren't existing anymore, that had been on the books, some of them gone for 20 years. So we just went through this process. So, but that still takes 3 readings of ordinance, so 3 meetings of the council to eliminate ordinance. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate.
All right, in the short time we have left, Community Engagement Committee update.
You want to start, or do you want me to?
Just talk fast.
So, yeah. Earth Day kickoff, April 21st, 4 to 7. It will be at the Connie Bean Center for sure. The library is helping us to host it. At the moment, we have 15 organizations, nonprofit, citizen action, city departments that are participating. We have another 3 that are sort of, I'm calling them maybe, but they'll probably be yeses, and then still a few more that we're waiting to hear back from. We will probably not have food. We're still working on whether or not there'll be music there or not. When we have more time, I will share more. As far as Earth Day events, we have 3 confirmed Earth Day events that are happening. They're essentially cleanups. The Eco Club and Seacoast Students for Sustainability are leading a massive effort to engage all our schools, which is really awesome. And then we'll have something happening out at Pierce Island to clean up that. The Conservation Commission is organizing a Little Harbor Trail cleanup, so that will be going on as well. But yeah.
Great. So the other thing going on with community engagement is our contract with Bright Action that Siri has fronted the funding for and support for. So Herb's going to speak about that.
Sure, and I'll make this very brief. And we'll give an update on the next meeting too. So Portsmouth Climate Action met with Bright Action on this past Monday to do a quick kickoff. And they laid out for us everything that what's next? What do we need to provide to them? So we have a laundry list, and I was going to reach out to Kate because there's some statistics, some data that we need I think a lot of it could come from the city. And so I'll reach out to you and Kate, and I think that data can easily be provided. There's photographs, logos, taglines, things like that are included in the package of what we need to provide to Bright Action to set the site up. And then we'll have to go in and actually set up the actions, and we have an opportunity to put in information about rebates, NH Saves and other types of things for the different actions. Toilets with the city, right? You put in a high efficiency toilet or shower head or whatever, the city gives you some credit back or a rebate. And then ultimately put together an implementation plan on how to launch this. And when we get closer to that point, we'll want to collaborate with the right people and enough people, because it'll be, the library, the city. I know Monty got hired on, which is awesome. So I think, when we get ready to launch this, he can probably help with that too, and you and Kate and a number of other folks too, to get this thing going. And then ultimately, I think the big, at the Earth Day kickoff, which is the clock is ticking, it's right around the corner. We want to have a table there with a computer or two and actually get people to sign up right then and there and do some, on the ground education. So more to come.
Great.
Yeah, we're making good progress.
Can we add an agenda item for next meeting for more in-depth and follow-up on Earth Day?
And in the next meeting, I can do a demo also of the product. So
Awesome.
that's probably worthwhile. You guys are probably tired of listening about what it is and would like to see it, so.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And next would be Clean Energy New Hampshire membership. Who's that?
Well, I think,
That John Carty, I think?
Bless you.
I think it's just, I don't know why Kate put it on here, other than we are officially members now. We got authorization, and then we finally got the membership. I guess the next step is figuring out what we do with it.
I had a quick question. When you discussed that previously, Peter, there was a question of whether people on this committee could attend events
Yeah.
underneath of that membership,
think
or
so.
did you have to be a city employee?
No, I think if you,
Okay.
well, that's a good question. Depends on the event, I guess. I
Okay.
would try it.
Okay,
But we can, if you have an event,
okay,
check with them, see what they say. Just say you're a member of the Sustainability Committee, because in that sense,
okay.
that's why we're members, so.
Because Clean Energy NH, right, they host a number of events.
They host
throughout the
events.
year.
They also are, I guess, technically a lobbying group. They're really supportive of the coalition that we've joined, the Clean Energy New Hampshire, the one that's our community power coalition that we're part of. And
That's what I was gonna ask. That's a
so
separate group.
it's a separate group,
Okay.
but they're a supporting group. So they, rather than the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire going to the legislature, Clean Energy New Hampshire goes to the legislature, but to support that and other clean energy ideas in the state. But, so that way they're good. They host workshops and things like that. And, yeah, I mean, I don't know that we can, that might be one thing that becoming a committee would get you, because like this is, the Conservation Commission can go to conferences and things like that and get funding for some of those things. Not everything, it's not a huge budget, but I think the membership, because you're on this committee, it would make sense to me
Okay.
that you could probably go.
Because I think we mentioned that because there are a number of events throughout the year that if you are a member of Clean Energy NH, then there's no fee, right? You get to attend the
Yeah.
event for free, and so
Yeah.
we want to make sure we capitalize on that. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I was just say, it would be lovely to work with them again. The Energy Advisory Committee worked with them on a presentation last year for community power, but it'd be great to work with him on a presentation around maybe a climate action plan to have, just to get the word out in the community about what we're doing. And and talk about it as part of, because right now, Community Power is on track, no guarantees, on track to launch by May or June in Portsmouth. So, you know, if we jump through all the hurdles we need to jump through and get all the approvals that we need to get, and the council finally does the final yes in April, then Community Power will launch, and that'll bring a lot of attention. So maybe that's a good time then to talk to Clean Energy New Hampshire about coming back and saying, okay, you're doing this, and the community's working on a climate action plan. And they could talk a little bit maybe about that. I don't know how much expertise they have around that, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else on that topic? All right. We already discussed your other business, Kate. Is there any other business that we should discuss
Yes.
in the next
I
1
have
minute?
one. It'll be quick. And it's directed at you students. I'll give the nice color one. Keeping History Above Water is a national conference on sea level rise and history. And they have a conference coming in May 7th through the 9th. It'll be at the AC Hotel. I think the cost is something like $200 for the conference. Yeah, $200. And so the first 10 students whose posters are accepted for display at the conference will receive scholarship covering their full conference registration fees, opening reception and breakfast and lunch, $100 value because it's a student, like a regular person is $200, I think. So if anybody here or you guys know people that are interested in this topic and want to put together a poster, and the committee will review it, and I don't think it's a super high bar, but they want to make sure a little thought and time went into it. And it's about the subject, keeping history above water. There's probably going to be room for, I think they said 20 posters. Yeah, no, the first 10 student posters get free display. So I think there'll be 20. There'll probably be some companies and other people that want to do posters too, or college and graduate students, but they really do want high school students too, just to engage everyone. So I'll give you guys these, and if you, I only have like 4 or 5, but if you want
Do you have a digital one you could email?
I have an email I can forward to you.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be great.
You guys are all anti-paper now, right?
No, actually, I love paper, but I'll fold it up and I'll put it in here, and it'll never be
Forget about
found
it. Yeah,
again.
I know. Yeah. No, definitely, I'll email it to you
Yeah,
guys.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and Strawberry Bank has exhibits about water and how they've been dealing with it, so it'd be really good to check in with that, or do your poster about it, I don't know.
Yeah, it's called Water Has a Memory, the Strawberry Bank exhibit.
Yeah, that's
Great.
Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Peter.
Yep.
Anyone else?
I don't know if this is appropriate to follow up on our discussion about the role of the committee and doing a short paragraph about it. But I just wanted to say, as far as the climate action plan goes, we have a contracted consulting group that's writing the plan. So if we're going to be talking about a role for us once the plan is written, we want to be talking to them about writing us into the plan. But in terms of what I would call implementation of the plan, I think that's more, a lot of it is more city staff roles than anything I could implement as a volunteer working on climate action. So I just wanted to discuss that and make sure. I just wasn't understanding when some people were saying about this committee implementing the plan. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, good, thank you.
Mine was just a question that I had remembered I had very quickly, and we don't even have to discuss it now. We can do it next meeting. When I heard about community power, I was like, oh yeah, community power, and it made me wonder if we become, not necessarily if that's our goal, but if we become the enforcement or the monitoring group for the climate action plan, what does that, do we become solely, is that our sole purpose, or does that leave us room? Does it limit our scope, or you know, would we would leave, you know, room for other projects, wouldn't we?
That's up to you, what this committee wants.
Next week discussion.
Yeah. Next month.
Think about it.
Yeah, we should brainstorm. We'll put together some ideas. But that was kind of my last question.
All right, let's do a quick round of what we're taking away. Why don't we start online this time? I see your face, Tori, so why don't you go ahead?
I am taking away that no matter standing or blue ribbon where we end up, I think that the type of discussion that we have here and the open-mindedness in general is nice. It doesn't seem like anyone is so stymied in their original position that, you know, not willing to change or evolve or listen to other takes, and I really appreciate that. So that's what I'm taking away.
Thank you. How about you, Bill?
I enjoyed the very meaningful discussion on the governance side. And I thought Donnie's presentation was very solid and got things off to a good good start, and I think opened up a lot of good discussion going forward, hopefully for helping shape things early.
Thank you. Josh?
Sure, I'm simply taking away that the meeting started with a presentation on the climate action plan, which is actually happening, and then led to a robust conversation on us possibly having a role in oversight of the implementation of the climate action plan. So it's almost the meeting itself went full circle.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's go this way.
Dialogue, group mind, we're better together, and community is powerful.
I'm just excited the climate action plan started, and to your question about how do we get in touch with them, I think what he didn't go into is the 3 different workshop areas. Each of those workshop areas are intended to be, and I think I mentioned this last meeting, areas where volunteers can play a role. So it'll probably be through me just to manage their time a little bit, but if anybody wants to work on any one or all 3 of those components, and you have a group or yourself, or you have a place you want to take it, we're going to have a meeting in a box and then a table you can do. So I'm hoping, and I'm thinking this is the place, sort of the clearinghouse of, volunteer groups that might do that. So I'm thinking of the 3 groups they put up there, but also the schools, obviously. So I hope everybody doesn't feel like they need to wait for the consultants to do the work. There'll be work to do. As soon as they start setting up these workshops, we'll have things we can spread out to the community and get feedback with. So not really a check-in, more of a ask announcement.
My takeaway was I was impressed with Donnie's presentation. I think those of us who haven't been as close to that kind of project, it was refreshing to see. It's refreshing that's here. It was, I think very informative and really exciting to see.
Yeah, I was impressed with Donnie's presentation. I feel very comfortable that we've selected the right partners to move forward with. I know this is not their first rodeo. We've got a lot of depth of experience, and I'm excited.
What's my takeaway? My takeaway is what an unexpected direction. I did not see that question that I had posed generating that discussion. But I'm glad it did, because we're thinking about the future role of this committee in, clearly we're at a sort of a crossroads where we're going to have to think about it and make some decisions about what's going to happen in the future. So I think that was a good thing. Yeah.
My takeaway is really around not just how great the presentation was that we received on the climate action plan, but the committee is asking the right questions. So I found that very impressive tonight, all of you.
My takeaway is I'm still spinning on Steve's question, and the teacher in me is asking, how do we really get the student voice on that Head Start, particularly with Kate's challenge of, can we Head Start areas that don't have a budget impact? And I feel like the students are going to have best angle on, I hope there's a way we can really empower that voice and pathway forward there.
I'll follow on Steve's word, crossroads. I think we are at a crossroads, and I think it's a really important time, given the urgency of climate change, as Bert reminds us.
I think this feels like a big meeting. Even before it started, I had a lot of great discussion about things in action and stuff happening. And then seeing the cap actually really being talked about, coming to fruition, and I love Steve's point and the discussion that it followed, so it just felt like a lot of big stuff.
My takeaway is humility, to be around such amazing movers and shakers like Donnie, like Peter, like Effie and Jess, who are getting things going with community engagement. It's so cool to see the ideas that we've talked about actually come to fruition and make a difference in our community. So very grateful.
I'm excited for what's to come. I feel like we discussed a lot and we have a lot to plan and go forward with, and it seems like we're leaving this meeting with a lot to do, which is super exciting and nerve-wracking, but exciting and nerve-wracking.
I love your approach.
We covered a lot of ground. We started out hearing about the timeline of this big project coming to fruition, and that alone is fantastic. And then the policy to me is so interesting, and that's such a blind spot for me that it's just fun to absorb all the procedural stuff and who does what and what can happen and where are we going next. And I think we are kind of an inflection point, but it's nevertheless I think it's a good point we're at, and it's positive and excited. So I'm feeling good about everything.
Awesome. I'm really excited about the cap. That's my big thing. But at the same time, looking at that timeline is like, wow, that's a whole year. That's like, one more year closer to 2030 and 2050, just figuring things out, which I think really speaks to what Steve brings up, that, we need to be acting today as well. And what Bert is constantly saying, the time is of the essence. And I'm just glad we have such a great group to toss these ideas around. So with that.
You got, Josh, Tori, and Bill are still out.
Nope, we started with them.
Oh, I'm sorry. My brain. Wow.
All right, with that, does anybody have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right.
Oh, when's the next meeting? Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, let's cover that. And
Glad you asked.
and who is
that's a great question.
facilitating and noting?
So Margot would typically
Good,
be,
okay.
well, I don't know, what's our calendar say?
Kate
about
put March
consistency.
23rd. The bottom
March
of the agenda.
23rd.
Great.
Yep.
Yes, I can be there.
And
23rd.
I don't know if Margot's up for the
I have it.
presentation, or
I'm
if
actually,
someone else is.
not 100% sure I can be, we said it's March 23rd.
Yep.
I might have, I have to take, I'm not sure I'm actually going to be able to be there in person, so probably not the right person to facilitate that
Okay.
meeting.
Yep.
Yeah. I can be there on Zoom, but I don't think I'm going to be in the state.
Wait, who's taking notes and who's facilitating?
That's what we're trying to
So we're
figure
figuring
out.
out.
Oh, okay.
I don't have
The
the
schedule's a
table.
little wonky. I think it needs to be adjusted.
Also, John, did you get my email about adding Evie to the email list?
Yeah?
Awesome.
Check your email
Perfect.
back.
Just wanted to
You're
check
all
it.
set? Yeah, this has Aubrey as the recorder, so we gotta,
For tonight? Or
Did
next
we
time?
switch it? Because,
for next time.
yeah.
I went out of order because I didn't take minutes next time, so that would be fine.
Is that all right?
And who facilitating? them?
Facilitate then.
Margot's up.
I know, and I won't be here physically. I don't think, unless it changes.
So who would be next so we could swap out?
Next April facilitator is Counselor Cook. Then it's Bert. This is, I think Kate did this weird. I'll double check. The schedule's a little off. I don't think it's typical structure, but either way. It's usually recorded in facilitator. I think that it got flipped around.
Okay.
So it's Aubrey and then Kate facilitating?
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
I can do that. I can do the 23rd.
Great.
So Kate facilitating, and Aubrey.
Sounds good.
Who seconded the motion? Did we second the motion to adjourn?
Not yet.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Let's go.
Second the motion, that you did a good job of facilitation.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Nice job.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
The money.
Good night, Josh.
Yes.
I just wanted to get back to you. Sorry.
I will go.
That's what I said, I've been doing it for council.
I will go tomorrow. If I remember, on my way out of
Break. Yeah, you too.
Never defined the end of it.
This is for the composting relay. She made me demo buckets, so I knew how it would work, but I'm gonna get different ones. Oh, well, we're gonna see what shakes out.
So we've had to, so what I, we now create.
my brain is more.
Now, anytime a committee goes, yours goes to
There was so much to absorb.
I used to be like,
that immediately becomes an agenda item.
but then I started to understand. Just like they start to pick up, and then you start to like
That's what we're starting with.
like first day of action. Now you're
I came to it, I was like bewildered.
I noticed our women, Catman, are so
My general.
once you get like a
About it, it's better, because then you're gonna say
really good to be here.
that math was able to be done as part of the budget process.
It's like a primer for
It's the same thing, except, right.
Solar panels of the high school. Was there any capital layout?
And I think what I heard this.
Solar panels on the, no,
Sunrise.
no.